What if life isn't fair, and it never was? You're not wrong for thinking that, for feeling that deeply, sometimes quietly, sometimes like a storm that won't let you sleep. You've played by the rules, you've shown up, you've given love, bent over backward, stayed silent when your heart was screaming, and yet, life handed others the reward. Not you, not this time. Again. Sometimes, it's not just the pain of the loss, it's the insult of invisibility, the haunting question, why not me? You scroll through your feed, and it seems like everyone else is 10 steps ahead. They smile, they thrive, they have the relationship, the job, the peace. And you're still stuck in that same emotional loop, that same question that no one else seems to be asking out loud. How do I keep going when it all feels unfair? But let me tell you something quietly powerful. The people who go the deepest, rise the highest, not the loudest, not the fastest, but the deepest. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're not falling behind. Maybe you're being carved open. And maybe that pain you're carrying is not a curse, but an invitation to go where others don't, to feel what others won't. And one day, to walk with a strength that doesn't come from victory, but from being broken and rebuilding anyway. In this video, we're going to explore what it means to get ahead not in the eyes of the world, but in your own soul when life seems rigged against you, when it feels like no one sees your effort, when love left you bleeding, when they got chosen and you didn't, when your story keeps repeating and healing feels like a cruel joke. This won't be a lesson, it will be a mirror. If you feel like this was made just for you, stay, breathe, let this find you. And if you've ever needed a space like this where it's okay to not be okay, subscribe to the channel. Like this video so it reaches someone else who's quietly breaking. And if something stirs in you, let me know in the comments. I read every single word, because this is not just content, this is healing. There's a moment most people don't talk about, the moment after you've been hurt, but before you've healed. That in-between place, the ache before clarity, the fog before light. It's not the heartbreak that breaks you, it's the silence afterward, the echo of your own thoughts, the quiet where the apology never arrived, the stillness where you expected arms to catch you, but found none. And in that space, something happens to your spirit. You start asking questions you never dared ask before. Why do I keep chasing people who don't choose me back? Why does love feel like begging? Why do I shrink just to keep others comfortable? Why do I carry pain that doesn't belong to me? These aren't surface-level questions. They're the kind that scrape at the bones, the kind that peel back everything that once made sense and leave you raw, vulnerable, and gasping for something real. You see, when life feels unfair, your mind goes looking for logic. But healing doesn't start in the mind. It starts in the wound. And your wound, it's sacred, not because it's beautiful, but because it's real, because it's yours. Carl Jung once hinted that the place we fear the most holds the treasure we seek, that your wound is not the thing that went wrong, but the very door you've been avoiding. The place that will lead you back to yourself if you dare to walk through it. But let's pause here, because that sounds poetic until you're the one bleeding, until you're the one lying awake, tracing every word they said, every moment you gave too much, until you're the one scrolling at 2 a.m., thinking, why did I make it so easy to leave me? The truth is, you were never weak. You were wired to love deeply, to feel with your whole being, and the world has not always been kind to people like you. You learned early how to overfunction, to please, to carry other people's storms just so you wouldn't drown in your own. You became the strong one, the understanding one, the forgiving one, and somewhere along the way, you forgot that you were allowed to need too. But here's the twist, the part no one tells you. When life feels most unfair, when you feel most unseen, that is the exact place where something unshakable can begin. Something that no one can take from you. Not love that is earned through performance. Not peace that is conditional on other people's choices. But a kind of inner grounding that says, even if I was left, I will not leave myself. That's how you get ahead. Not by pushing harder, not by faking your confidence or numbing your pain, but by standing still long enough to hear the voice underneath the survival. The whisper that says, "This is not the end. It's the threshold. You don't need to have it all figured out today. You just need to stop running from your own story." Because the pain you avoid becomes the pattern you repeat, but the pain you face becomes the path you free. So if you're in that place right now where everything feels like too much and nothing feels like enough, please hear this. You are not broken. You are breaking open. And that is not the same thing. Sometimes the people who seem the most put together are the ones falling apart in the quietest ways. They show up to work, they reply to texts, they smile just enough to not raise concern, but behind the eyes, there's this weight, like they're carrying something no one ever asked about, like they're tired of being the strong one, the steady one, the one who always understands. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've mastered the art of hiding in plain sight, not because you're dishonest, but because you learned a long time ago that vulnerability wasn't safe, that your feelings were too much, that being sensitive meant being dramatic, that needing was a weakness. So you stopped expressing, you started performing, and life became about surviving, not living. But even if you silence yourself to fit in, your soul remembers the truth. It remembers the moment you weren't chosen, the way your chest tightened when they picked someone else, not just in love, but in life, at work, in friendship. It remembers the nights you comforted others while your own heart was breaking. The way you whispered, "I'm fine," even when you felt like you were crumbling. Life taught you to be quiet, but your wounds, they have a voice, and they will speak, whether you listen or not. Sometimes they speak in exhaustion, sometimes in anxiety, sometimes in a numbness that makes everything feel muted food, music, connection. You want to feel something real, but you don't know how to reach it anymore. You're not crazy. You're grieving, not just people, but parts of yourself that had to die just to survive. Let that sink in, because getting ahead in an unfair life isn't about winning. It's about remembering. Remembering who you were before the world told you who to be, before you shrunk, before you masked, before you silenced the parts of you that didn't fit someone else's comfort zone. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's story. But the beautiful thing about pain is that it demands honesty. It strips away the pretending. It brings you to your knees, not because you're weak, but because you're finally ready to meet yourself without the armor. That's what this moment is, right now. A reckoning with your truth, a returning to the parts of you that were left behind in the name of being loved, being accepted, being enough. And yes, the world might still be unfair, but you can stop being unfair to yourself. You can choose to no longer prove your worth through sacrifice. You can choose to stop abandoning yourself just to be chosen by others. You can choose to rest, to feel, to breathe. That's what getting ahead looks like now. It's not a finish line, it's a homecoming. And I know you've been tired. I know you've wanted to give up. But please, stay a little longer, because just beneath your tiredness is a kind of clarity that only comes from the ashes. And you're almost there. There's a kind of ache that doesn't scream. It just lingers. It's the kind that settles into your bones, shows up in the quiet parts of your day, in the pause between texts, in the silence after laughter, in the space between everything you give and what never comes back. You've likely learned to function with it, to keep going, to smile when needed, to pour into others even when your own cup feels empty. And somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself that this is just how life is, that some people are simply meant to be the givers, that your softness is a liability, that fairness is for other people. But listen, who told you that your heart was too much? Who convinced you that asking for more meant you were needy or broken or hard to love? Because the truth is, many people don't reject you. They reject the mirror you hold up, the depth you bring, the honesty you carry, the way you feel things that others are too afraid to touch in themselves. So they run, or they stay but keep you at arm's length, or they take and take and take because they've never learned to give. And you stay, you hope, you forgive, you explain, you wait for the love to come back the way you gave it. But it doesn't. And a quiet voice starts to whisper, maybe something is wrong with me. Let's pause here, because this is where so many people live, in the ache of almost being loved, almost being chosen, almost being seen. That ache, it's not weakness, it's not your flaw, it's the sacred part of you that remembers what love is supposed to feel like, remembers how it felt when your needs were not burdens, but invitations, remembers how it felt before you learned to apologize for your existence. Getting ahead when life feels unfair is not about outworking your pain. It's about no longer gaslighting it, no longer shrinking it to make others comfortable, no longer translating your intuition into language for people who refuse to hear. Because the truth is, you don't need to become less. You just need to become you without the apology. And that's not easy. It means grieving the versions of you that bent and twisted and performed. It means mourning the love you almost had, the recognition you almost got, the parent who almost saw you, the partner who almost stayed. But almost is not love. And you deserve more than almost. You deserve the kind of life that doesn't require you to hurt yourself to be part of it. And maybe, just maybe, this ache you've been carrying isn't here to punish you. Maybe it's here to awaken you, to show you where you've been giving from emptiness, to show you where you've been hoping for crumbs, to show you the difference between being tolerated and being treasured. That's not a small thing. That's not a side note in your story. That is your story shifting. And when you finally begin to trust that your sensitivity is not your shame but your power, life stops being something you chase. It becomes something you create. One breath, one boundary, one brave choice at a time. There comes a moment, often quietly, when something inside you whispers, I can't keep doing this. Not in a dramatic way, not in a breaking down on the floor kind of way, but in a calm, bone-deep knowing, a moment when you realize you've spent years trying to earn what should have been given freely: love, safety, respect, a voice. And that moment, it's sacred, because it means something in you has finally had enough, not of love, not of life, but of living in ways that betray your own soul. Maybe for years you confused peace with silence. Maybe you called chaos passion. Maybe you thought love meant staying, no matter how much it hurt. Maybe you made yourself small so someone else could feel big. Maybe you became whoever they needed and lost yourself in the process. But here's the thing no one told you. The moment you start telling yourself the truth, everything changes. You stop pretending you're fine. You stop defending people who hurt you. You stop explaining your worth. You stop performing. And that's when the fear kicks in. Because if you're not who you've always been, if you're no longer the fixer, the pleaser, the strong one, then who are you? Who are you without your wounds? That question, it terrifies people. Because so much of your identity can become wrapped around your pain, around your survival, around the roles you played to stay safe. But listen closely. There's a version of you beneath all of that. A version untouched by rejection, unscarred by betrayal. A version who doesn't need to be needed to feel valuable. A version who simply is, without proving, without pleasing, without shrinking. You catch glimpses of them in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when you let your guard down, when you cry in the car and whisper, I just want to be free. That's the real you. And the road to that version of yourself, it's not paved with perfection. It's paved with honesty, with mess, with deep, uncomfortable, courageous truth. Like admitting you stayed too long in places that starved you, that you held on because letting go felt like failure, that you gave chances because you wanted to believe people could change, that you ignored your gut because their validation felt like oxygen. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. But now you're seeing clearly. You're beginning to understand that getting ahead doesn't always look like building. Sometimes it looks like burning the old patterns, the old rules, the old masks. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, the world around you starts to shift. People fall away, not because you're broken, but because you're healing. Because your boundaries make those who thrived on your silence uncomfortable. Because your light makes those who benefited from your dimness squint. And it hurts. Oh, it hurts. But it also sets you free. You stop asking for crumbs. You stop hoping they'll finally understand. You stop negotiating your worth. You start honoring your no. You start listening to your body. You start walking away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That is how you get ahead when life feels unfair. Not by becoming colder, but by becoming clearer. Not by building walls, but by planting roots. Not by changing who you are, but by remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. You're not lost. You're just returning. You'll know you're healing when silence starts to feel like safety, not punishment. When the absence of chaos no longer makes you anxious. When you stop confusing intensity with intimacy. When peace doesn't bore you, it soothes you. This is what they don't prepare you for. That healing, real healing, is quiet and lonely and disorienting, especially at first, because you've been wired for noise, for urgency, for emotional roller coasters that felt like love, even when they were hurting you. You were trained to chase, to fix, to make sense of people who never made you feel safe. So when you finally choose yourself over the familiar pain, it doesn't feel good right away. It feels like withdrawal. Because what you were addicted to wasn't just the person, it was the pattern, the proving, the hope that this time it would be different. But you're waking up now. You're seeing the pattern, and that's everything. Because healing doesn't start when things feel fair. Healing starts when you realize you don't need fairness to be free. You need truth. And here's the truth. The people who hurt you were never meant to define you. The wounds you carry are not your identity. The approval you chase will never satisfy the ache you've tried to ignore. You can't heal by going back to what broke you, but you can heal by turning inward, by offering yourself the safety no one else did, by becoming the person your younger self needed. You may not have had a choice in how you were wounded, but you have a choice in how you rise. And maybe rising doesn't look like the movies. Maybe it doesn't look like sudden success or epic revenge. Maybe it looks like soft mornings and slow boundaries, like deleting their number without fanfare, like walking past the old places without flinching, like not reacting to the things that used to consume you. That's real power, not the kind that shouts, the kind that stays grounded, stays sovereign, stays soft, even when the world taught you to be hard. And here's the paradox. Life may never become fair in the way you hoped. You may never get the apology, the closure, the recognition, but you don't need those things to become whole. Because wholeness was never about getting what you deserved from others. It was about giving yourself what they never could. That's how you begin to rewrite the story. That's how you finally get ahead, not on their terms, but on yours. So if you're in the middle of the fog, if you feel like giving up, if you're tired of the work, the waiting, the wounds that won't seem to heal, pause. And remember, there is no timeline for coming home to yourself. There's only the next breath, the next truth, the next gentle reminder that you are not broken. You are just remembering. There is a moment not loud, not flashy, where something shifts deep inside you. It doesn't come with applause. It's not something anyone else can see, but you feel it. A quiet refusal, not to love, not to hope, but to keep betraying yourself in the name of being loved. You no longer chase after people who leave you guessing. You no longer silence your voice to avoid rocking the boat. You no longer beg to be seen, because the ache of not being chosen no longer outweighs the peace of choosing yourself. That's the moment most people miss. They think healing is a mountaintop revelation, that it looks like a sudden breakthrough, a dramatic goodbye, a complete reinvention. But more often, it looks like this: waking up and not texting them back, sitting with the discomfort instead of numbing it, saying no even when your voice shakes, letting the call go to voicemail, holding your own hand when it feels like no one else will. It's slow, it's unglamorous, but it's real. And when you start honoring your truth instead of outsourcing your worth, life begins to respond in the most subtle ways. The wrong people start falling away. The noise softens. Your body stops bracing for impact. You breathe a little easier. And somewhere along the way, you stop asking, why is life so unfair? Because the question evolves. It becomes, why was I so willing to live in survival mode for so long? That's when it clicks. The pain didn't mean you were unlovable. It meant you were accepting less than what you knew, deep down, you deserved. Because you didn't know how to ask for more. Because asking felt risky. Because somewhere in your story, love got tangled with fear, with sacrifice, with earning. But now you see the difference. Real love doesn't confuse you. It calms you. It doesn't demand proof. It meets you. It sees the parts you used to hide and says, I'm still here. And when you begin offering that kind of love to yourself, you stop settling for anything less. Yes, life still has its unfair edges. There will still be people who ghost, who lie, who fail to show up. There will still be doors that close and dreams that get delayed. But those things stop defining you, because your worth is no longer up for debate. You become your own constant, your own clarity, your own compass. That's the real flex. Not being above pain, but being rooted enough that the pain doesn't uproot you. Not needing to win, but refusing to lose yourself. Not building a perfect life, but creating a life where you don't have to pretend. That is getting ahead, and no one can take that from you. There's something sacred about realizing you no longer need to be saved. That what you were searching for in them, the warmth, the recognition, the feeling of finally being enough, was never really theirs to give. It was always yours to remember. That's what happens when you stop waiting. Waiting for the text, waiting for the apology, waiting for the moment when someone finally chooses you the way you've always chosen them. You realize that waiting was just a way of abandoning yourself gently, quietly, repeatedly. And now you choose to return, not in some grand gesture, but in the smallest, most tender ways. By eating when you're hungry instead of forgetting yourself again. By leaving the room when the energy turns cold. By not arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. By believing your gut the first time instead of explaining it away. You begin to act like someone who matters to themselves. That's not arrogance. That's healing. Because for so long you were trained to see yourself through their lens. Were you too sensitive? Too emotional? Too much? No, you were too aware of what others avoided, too tuned in, too deeply feeling in a world that rewards numbness. And instead of seeing that as your gift, you twisted it into shame. But not anymore. Now you honor the way you feel. You stop judging the tears. You stop pushing through the anxiety. You stop shaming your softness and calling it weakness. Because your softness is what survived. It's what stayed open when life gave you every reason to close. That's what makes you strong. And when you carry that kind of strength, not the strength to harden, but the strength to stay human, you move through the world differently. You stop chasing people who require you to forget yourself. You stop confusing connection with chemistry. You stop staying in rooms where your silence is the price of admission. And you start building your life not as a performance, but as a truth. That's where real peace comes from. Not from getting it all right, but from no longer needing to get it all right to feel worthy. You let yourself be seen as you are, healing, messy, enough. You no longer pretend, because what's the point of appearing whole in a life that leaves you empty? You'd rather be real. You'd rather be safe with yourself than impressive to the world. And that choice, though quiet, though invisible to most, is the most radical kind of freedom. It's not the path they teach you. It's not the path that gets the applause. But it's the path that finally brings you home. And you're walking it now. And then, one day, without realizing it, you wake up and your heart feels a little lighter. Not because everything is fixed, not because the world suddenly became fair, but because somewhere along the path, you stopped carrying what was never yours to hold. You stopped performing for love. You stopped bleeding for connection. You stopped making homes out of people who only offered you shelter during the storm. You didn't even notice the shift at first. It was subtle. The way your body stopped tensing around certain names. The way silence no longer felt like punishment. The way you laughed without watching who was looking. You were just being. And that, after everything, is no small miracle. Because for so long, being yourself felt dangerous. Like you had to edit your truth just to belong. Like your feelings were inconvenient, your needs too loud. But now you know. You were never too much. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. And when you stop asking people to love you in ways they've never learned to love themselves, you stop being disappointed by their silence. You start offering yourself the kind of safety you used to beg for. That's what getting ahead really means. Not gaining more, but losing what was never real. The masks, the guilt, the constant questioning of your enoughness. And in that space, life begins to feel new. Not perfect, but yours. You're no longer living on autopilot. No longer addicted to the highs and lows of people who couldn't hold you. You start savoring the slow moments, the sunlight through your window, the way music sounds when no one else is around, the stillness of knowing you're not at war with yourself anymore. That's the quiet reward of choosing healing over hustling. You begin to see that fairness isn't about external validation. It's about internal liberation. It's about no longer needing life to make sense in order to feel worthy of living it fully. And yes, there will still be moments that sting, moments that remind you of the old ache. But now, you know how to hold yourself through them. You don't collapse. You don't shatter. You sit. You breathe. You feel. You rise. Over and over again, with grace. Because your worth is no longer tied to how others treat you. It's tethered to the quiet, knowing that your existence is enough. That your heart, in all its mess and beauty, is not a burden but a blessing. And for the first time in a long time, you believe it. Somewhere in that stillness, after the chaos has left, after the need to prove has faded, you find something you didn't know you were looking for. Peace. Not the performative kind. Not the curated stillness that only exists on vacations or in filtered photos, but a real, soul-deep peace. The kind that doesn't need noise to feel alive. The kind that exists even when you're alone in your room, doing nothing but breathing. You realize you're no longer waiting, not for them to come back, not for life to apologize, not for the pain to disappear, not even for the future to rescue you from the present. You are simply here. And that is the revolution. Because for so long, everything about your life revolved around after. After the healing, after the breakup, after you lose the weight, after you finally get recognized, after they finally understand, but after keeps you running in circles, chasing a horizon that was never meant to be caught. And now you've stopped. You've turned inward. And in that pause, there's power. The power to choose. The power to no longer tolerate half-love. The power to make space for your joy, not the kind that comes in fireworks, but the kind that glows like embers. Steady, quiet, enough. You notice things differently now. The sound of your own voice when you're not hiding, the way your laughter feels when it's not forced, the way your reflection looks when you're not dissecting it through the lens of someone else's standards. You're becoming whole. Not because everything is in place, but because you've stopped believing that you are a puzzle to be solved. You are not waiting to be completed. You were never missing pieces. You were just taught to abandon the ones that didn't fit someone else's picture. But now, you gather them back, one by one. The fierce parts, the soft parts, the angry, grieving, radiant, loud, awkward, healing, holy parts. All of you is welcome now. And that's what makes life feel new, not because it changed, but because you did. Because you stopped measuring your worth against other people's stories. because you stopped confusing being needed with being valued, because you stopped letting pain write your narrative. Now you write it. Now you choose. Not perfectly, not without fear, but with presence, with love, with truth. And that is everything.